I now look to Damian Green to continue the case for the opposition.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a truly terrifying thought that it was 40 years ago that I first sat in that chair as President, and therefore a few years before that I first came up to Oxford, as I know many of you will just have done. And I came up completely in awe of its reputation. I was excited and slightly worried at the prospect of meeting the brightest people, the sharpest minds, the most brilliant wits. Then I came to the Oxford Union Bar. I thought that's much more like it. A bunch of drunks with a passing interest in politics. Now I feel at home. But people have often said to me, when I come back to the Union, come back to Oxford, did the Oxford Union help in your political career? What skills did you learn that were useful? And the answer, broadly speaking, is none. However, I to this day carry with me the important message that was in the Balliol fire regulations in my day, which they had absolutely no respect for the intelligence of Balliol undergraduates in those days, since they started, if you are present at the outbreak of a fire, shout fire and try to put it out. But they then went on with something which was much more useful, where they said, keep your head down at all times when moving about. If necessary, crawl. That's the message I took into politics from my time at Oxford. I only want to make 2 points in this debate. This is Oxford, so you are the most intelligent audience I will speak to this year. In the House of Commons, 1 point is the maximum people will get, and sometimes that's more than the maximum that people can understand. But I have 2 points to make tonight. The first point is a general one, a universal one, that Conservative governments are better for Britain than Labour governments, which is the only alternative these days, because properly regulated free market economies are better at spreading freedom and prosperity and control to millions of people than socialism is or ever has been. And the argument is often made that capitalism is broken. And of course, capitalism has had some difficult years since the financial crash that Vince referred to, and it was indeed a pleasure to serve in government with Vince. It may have been more of a pleasure for me than it was for him at certain times, but it was great to have him on board for those happy years. But the central point I make is that you only need any kind of sense of history to realise that for all the rhetoric from socialists, from Marx onwards, that actually capitalism is better for people generally, and particularly better for poor people. And it is better now than it was 40 years ago when I was an undergraduate sitting on these benches, when again we were going through a fairly terrible period. And I think one of the great ironies that I observe in the modern world, which in almost every way is better than the world was, than it was when I was growing up, when I was your age. One of the great ironies of the modern world is to see the Occupy movement using their iPhones to organise demonstrations against capitalism, to see the really quite effective campaigning by Momentum, by people in the Labour Party, promoting socialism through Facebook and Twitter. These are the essence of capitalism. You would not have these tools that give us freedoms to communicate and entertain ourselves and organize ourselves there weren't even in science fiction books when I was your age. The idea of Facebook and Twitter was not even written by those looking into the future. They are now a reality. In both those cases, actually, in Facebook and Twitter, they're both barely a decade old. Facebook, I think, is about 6 or 7 years old. We can invent things because of the free market system. We can spread them throughout the world. We can let people in advanced societies and less advanced societies enjoy freedoms that were unknown not just to their parents, but to our parents, or indeed to us 10 years ago. And that's all because of capitalism and free markets. And anyone who tries to convince you that socialism is the route either to freedom or to mass prosperity is frankly deceiving you. There's somebody at the back there. Yes?
You say that it's capitalism that's given us Facebook and Twitter, but surely those sorts of innovations, they're research and development. In a free market, in a free market you don't get research and development. It's only through government intervention, through like patent law, that sort of thing, where you actually have regulation that you get research and development.
Well, can I respectfully disagree in that I don't observe that it's the National Facebook Corporation that has produced Facebook. I don't see that it's the US government that produces the official Pentagon iPhone. Actually, it is individual entrepreneurs acting on ideas, raising capital from the private sector and selling their goods in a free market. That's what provides technical advance. That's what provides better lives for all of us. There was somebody else. There, over there. Sorry.
If the Honourable Ex-President Balliol College is so supportive of free markets, then why is he so supportive of government policy which involves crashing out one of the largest, most successful single free markets ever created?
Let me deal directly with Brexit. Because, as others have already mentioned, you all know the position I took. But the reason why I think it is my duty as a government minister, indeed as a public servant, which is what politicians are, to actually try and make the best of Brexit, is because that's what the British people have told me to do. I'm a Democrat. I believe in respecting the will of the British people. And of course the negotiations are going to be bumpy and difficult, but we are making progress, and I thought, en passant, it involved a degree of elegance and chutzpah for Hillary to complain about splits in the cabinet. Hillary walked out of the shadow cabinet because he couldn't stand Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. Now, the shadow cabinet...
actually sacked.
The shadow... Let me correct myself, for those who didn't hear Hillary, he was sacked from the shadow cabinet because he liked Jeremy Corbyn's leadership. And it may well be true that the shadow cabinet is more united than the cabinet, but if it's true, it's only true because anyone of talent has been sacked by Jeremy Corbyn because they didn't agree with Jeremy Corbyn. That's why Hillary's sitting on the back benches now. But let me deal also with some of the key domestic issues. There are two big tasks for this government. One is sorting out the best deal for Brexit, and the other is righting those burning injustices that Theresa talked about. And so that's why I'm proud that not only have we reduced the deficit, but that employment is up by 3 million since 2010. We've got the lowest unemployment rate for 40 years. We've got more women in work than ever before. We've got the lowest youth unemployment rate we've had since records began. I think I'm getting trouble on time, if you will excuse me. A basic rate taxpayer is paying £3,000 less income tax now than they were in 2010. But at the same time, I'm proud to be a member of a government that has met our international commitment to spend 0.7% of our GDP on overseas aid. No government before, Labour, Conservative or Coalition, has done that. I'm proud that in 2010 to 2015 we introduced that, and I'm even more proud that the current Conservative government has kept to that commitment, because there are children who would otherwise be dead in Africa today if it weren't for the British government's commitment. I'm proud to be doing that. I'm also proud to be meeting one of the few NATO members to meet our commitment to spend 2% of our GDP on defence, because it is very, very important in this increasingly dangerous world that we maintain our strong armed forces, and to be able to do both the aid commitment and the defence commitment makes us unique in Europe as a country, meeting both those commitments, and I'm proud of both. Can I get one more intervention in, and then I'll finish?
How come the right honourable gentleman in the same speech defended capitalism and then discussed the need for aid for starving children? It just seems like a slight conflict.
Because, well, two reasons. First of all, capitalism produces the wealth, which means we can afford to have the aid budget. And secondly, as it happens, the best long-term future for countries in Africa and elsewhere is to be able to trade with European countries. One of the arguments against the European Union is that the European Union closes its markets to goods from Africa. The long-term future is for them to be able to sell their goods to us freely, so that they can develop the kind of economy that we've enjoyed for decades, and in our cases, centuries. So there is a simple choice before you all this evening, before you decide which door to go through. You can either stick with a government that is taking us through tough times under a determined Prime Minister, or you can risk it on somebody who, frankly, is a chancer, Jeremy Corbyn, who promises the earth will promise you whatever you want, but is deceiving you, particularly students. He's deceiving you. We've seen since the election that they've already rowed back on their commitment about student debt. A Labour Party that tolerates anti-Semitism while claiming to be anti-racist, and whose spendthrift economic policies would bankrupt Britain again, as actually it was bankrupt in the 1970s when I was sitting here for the first time. So you have a clear choice. Stick with a Conservative government that is able to take the decisions that we need for our future, or be deceived by the Labour Party. That's the choice before you this evening. It's the choice before the country. I would strongly recommend you stick with the Conservatives. Thank you.